All right, why don't we get started? For those of you that I don't know, my name is Brian Levy, and I have responsibility for Ethics Week with a whole host of folks in the College of Business. So we'd like to thank our sponsors, the Mendoza College of Business, the Notre Dame Deloitte Center for Leadership, Ethical Leadership, and Chase Bank. Welcome to the 23rd Annual Ethics Week. We have a theme this year, Women Lead, and some of you might be wondering how we arrived at that theme. When we met, we talked about, we sort of quickly settled on sort of gender issues in the workplace, and we talked about Me Too, and we talked about the glass ceiling, and we talked about the gender pay gap, and sort of all the usual topics, and we thought maybe we should have folks come and talk about that, but that seemed a little bit too narrow and prescriptive, so we thought, why don't we just invite some really smart, accomplished, successful leaders who happen to be women, and then let them talk about whatever they think is important, and that gets us to our guest this evening, Cathy David. I'm going to date both of us a little bit. I remember her from campus in the 1980s. I won't say what years precisely, as the manager over at Irish Gardens, the flower shop over in La Fortune, as the president of Breen Phillips Hall, as the student body vice president, and then shortly after graduation, I wasn't surprised to find that she was the young alumni representative on the Notre Dame Board of Trustees and the College of Business Advisory Council. And she was a marketing major when I knew her here, and so that led to a series of marketing and merchandising jobs at companies like Ernest and Julio Gallo and Target and Sears and ultimately Pier 1 and ultimately leadership positions in those companies, not just marketing. Along the way, she picked up an MBA degree at the Kellogg School at Northwestern. And based on all this experience I've described, you might imagine she probably should have been teaching those classes instead of just taking them. And now she's back on campus as a fellow in our, I want to make sure I get this right, in our Notre Dame Inspired Leadership Initiative and thinking about what's next, what her next chapter is. But I'm very happy in the meantime that she's here with us and going to share her insights. So please join me in welcoming Cathy David.
Good. So I told Brian, or Professor Levy, when I agreed to do this, I wanted to see if I could add a little energy to the room. It's 5 o'clock, it's late, you've all had a full day, you have to sit here for an hour, you have to write something about what you hear. And so I said, hey, do you think I can have a walk-up song? And he is from New Jersey and a sports fan, and he was thinking, Mariano Rivera will play Sandman. This is going to be great. And I would tell you that you don't know me yet, but I did not pick Metallica as my walk-up song. Does anybody know what song that was playing? Wow, very good. You get a cup of coffee. So, Norman Greenbaum, one-hit wonder, Spirit in the Sky. So, very good. Excellent. So, this is not Welcome to the Jungle. This is Welcome to Stayer Center. Welcome to Ethics Week 2020. I am delighted and honored to be part of this week with you. Hi, Hakeem. Delighted to be a part of with you guys, and I know some of you from classes, and I appreciate your being here, whether you're required to be here or not. So thank you for coming. We're going to talk today a little bit about, I'm going to talk for a little while, and then hopefully we'll have a conversation, but I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned throughout my life and career, and the lessons, and then the stories behind those lessons, and I'll share those with you. So it's going to sound like I'm talking about me, because I actually am, but I'm also going to say, I want you to view it in terms of your story. So I'll talk about things, hi Michael, I'll talk about things that are important to me and things I've learned, but I hope you listen through your own lens and what it would look like in your life and what it would feel like and what that looks like. And I've done a little bit of gathering some of the souvenirs that I've saved. I'm a saver of things, and I'll show you some of those as we go along. But if you were here last night, Carolyn Wu talked a little bit about her story and where she came from and the geography and the background. And so I thought I would also do that as well. Mine is not nearly as sexy or as exotic as hers, but it helps to understand the framework and the context of where I'm coming from. So the first thing I'll do is share with you where I'm coming from. So my birth family, I'm from New York. I was born in Queens. My family's from Wales. Originally, St. David was the patron saint of Wales. I have a brother, and I have lost some of my accent, but not all of my attitude from New York. My brother is 13 months younger than I am, and it's an important part of my story because we played sports together, we had shared friends together, and as we grew up, we stayed very close. He's one of my most important allies. He has a family of his own now, but he's one of my favorite people on the planet. I went to high school on Long Island and played sports in high school. I lettered in 5 different sports, and I was the editor of the yearbook, the editor of the newspaper, the president of the class. I was that person who was top 10, who did all of those things because I loved it. And it won't come as any surprise to you that I was also a Girl Scout. Because that comes with the territory. The Girl Scout part of it is funny because now people often say that when I'm around, people behave better. And it's probably from being a Girl Scout. I'm not sure what it's actually from, but I do like the idea of having been a Girl Scout. Have any of you in this room, any of you Eagle Scouts? 1, 2. You should be extraordinarily proud of being an Eagle Scout. It's a really tough thing to achieve. If any of you have younger siblings, please encourage them to stay with Eagle Scouting. And I've just found out that young women can also be Eagle Scouts as starting this year. So it's very exciting to be able to do that. I wasn't able to do that, but I loved being a Girl Scout. I was like a human permission slip. So if you wanted to do something, all you had to do was tell your parents that I was doing it, and then you were allowed to do it. So it was one of those things that helped get me through, and I had a lot of friends growing up in that era. So I went from New York to Indiana. I am not a legacy. I have no family that went to Notre Dame. I had a boyfriend who wanted to play basketball, and that's how it came on my radar. And so I came to college at Notre Dame. At the time, I was a marketing major. My family is very much accounting based. My dad was an accountant, my brother's an accountant, my mother was an accountant, my aunt was a professor at St. John's. And I stepped way, way, way out of the box, and I went to marketing. So it was a big stretch, but I really believe that people and ideas are what I relate to, and so that was, for me, the big thing and the way that I wanted to go get a business degree and to focus on marketing. When I graduated, I went to work in California for the Ernest & Gilo Gallo Winery. And at the time, way different than it is today, it was very simple. You would get a suit, you'd write a resume, you'd go to the Career Center, you'd interview, and you'd get job offers. And that's sort of how it worked. It was pretty simple. So I had job offers from Leo Burnett, Procter & Gamble, and Ernest & Gilo Gallo, and I wound up going out to work for the Gallo Winery. So I worked in LA for Gallo, and then I worked in Northern California at the winery in Modesto, and then I moved back to Chicago with them, and covered from North Dakota to Oklahoma to Maine as my territory. And while I was there, I decided I wanted to go back to school and get a degree. So I went back to Kellogg and have a master's degree in marketing, organizational behavior, and international business. And then I went to work for a little retailer that had 300 stores and was based in Minnesota. It's called Target. So it was early days for Target. But I went and worked at Target for a little while, and then I spent some time in Florida working in a Target store to try to understand how things worked. I went back to Minnesota, and when I left Target, I moved to Texas. I was the president of a company called Burns of Boston, which was owned by Newell Rubbermaid. They made products, consumer products, Graco, Little Tikes, Sharpie, Levolor, different brands you know, and this one was based in Texas. When I left Texas, I went to Chicago. I had met the man who would become my husband, and we went to Chicago, and I worked for a company called The Great Indoors. When I left there, we moved back to California. Then I moved to Tennessee, and I was the president and chief operating officer for Kirkland's, which is a publicly traded company. And when I left Kirkland's on a non-compete, I owned a restaurant. I raised and raced thoroughbred horses and ran a couple of small stores, and then I went to work for Pier 1 back in Texas. So I moved a lot, a couple of different jobs, but I moved for love, I moved for school, and I moved for work. So different reasons that you move. So that is the background. So now, what I was sharing with my new friends from the nonprofit administration is that I'm going to give you 10 lessons that I've learned and the idea behind them of the story of how I learned that. You're welcome to interrupt. I'll allow for questions at the end also, so please feel free to chime in. So my first one is detours can be exciting. GPS is I think of it as sort of generally pretty sure, like I have a sense of where I'm going. But the idea of being able to think about where you're going, but not following a ladder and climbing straight up a ladder and saying, this is where I'm going to go, and I'm going to do this next, and I'm going to do this after that. In my case, the first time I remember what I wanted to do, I was in 5th grade. Stephen Colbert gave a speech at Northwestern's graduation, which I thought was great. And he talks about if all of our dreams came true, there would be a lot of princesses and cowboys running around in the world today. Well, my first job that I wanted to be was a flight attendant, or an airline stewardess, actually. So this is my career report from 5th grade. And at the time, Eastern Airlines, which has subsequently been bought by many different companies, they would run commercials. And all of their planes were named after flight attendants who were on that plane. So I decided I want to be a flight attendant. I'm going to run the campaign. I'm Cathy, fly me. I went out and I talked to airline stewardesses, union representatives, people from the company. I'm clearly not a flight attendant, but there's a kernel of truth in that. So as you think about things that you want to be, and there's elements, and for me it was the part about travel and meeting new people and going to new places became a very important part of my journey and how I was thinking about things. So this particular career path didn't happen, but I think that there's a moment of truth that came out of it. Ultimately, I went to work for the Gallo Winery. And the reason I went to work for the Gallo Winery was because someone told me they don't hire girls, because girls can't do that job. So I had my offer from Procter & Gamble, Leo Burnett, Gallo Winery, and as Brian said, I was active on campus, and I was very busy. I didn't have time to make a decision about jobs. And when the time came, someone said, women can't do that job. And I was like, oh, really? Well, I will show you. I will show them. I will take that job and show them that I can do this job. And I went to work for the Gallo Winery, and I was miserable. It was awful. It was not the right job for me. I really was in a position that it was not, it was like soul sucking. I didn't get any enjoyment out of it. The company was great, the people were great, the job I had was not the right job for me, and it took me a little while to figure that out. Part of the job was working in grocery stores, and you sold cases of wine to grocers, and you tried to put them into places where customers would think about wine. So by the cheese counter, by the meat counter, so you would think, oh, I need a bottle of wine, and take a bottle of wine with you. And one day, I was working by the cheese counter, and the refrigerators have those metal plates on the side, acting almost like a mirror. And I saw myself in the mirror, and I didn't recognize myself. I was miserable and unhappy and not smiling, and I realized I was really in the wrong place. And I didn't know what to do about it, because I don't quit things. I continued working hard on what I'm doing, and I wound up calling my dad. Pre-cell phone, had to go find a payphone, and I thought he'd give me the you don't quit lecture and you have to stay and tough it out. But he was very compassionate, and I don't remember what he said, but I figured out that I liked the company, but I was in the wrong job. I had to figure out something else. And ultimately, I went on to be a trainer, and then I ran the training department, and I was in marketing, and it worked out all right. But it was a really tough thing, because my motivation was trying to prove something to someone else instead of thinking about what I really wanted. But it doesn't always mean you shouldn't worry about being the only girl in a place, because my, sorry, I've lost my presentation. This is another position where I was the only girl. I am the one in the back in the middle, if you're having trouble figuring it out. This is my high school Little League team. So I was a senior in high school. I played sports with my brother, as I told you. I played softball at school, but I really wanted to play hardball, which is a very different game than softball. And so I went out and tried out for this team, and I was drafted on the team, and the coaches drafted me because they thought the boys would behave better since I was around. But it turns out that I actually had a knack for it. And I pitched, I played short, I hit cleanup, and I won the Little League scholarship to college that year. So in this case, I was the only girl, and it was okay, because my motivation was, I really want to do this, I love this, versus alternatively, I did it for somebody else, or to prove something to somebody else. And so overall, in the past 20 or 30 years, what I have figured out for me, if people ask me what my goals are, there's three. One is to be happy, one is to be challenged, and one is to make a difference. And it doesn't mean I don't want to be successful and I don't want to grow in my career. It just means there are some things that are more important than title and climbing and ambition and doing things for the wrong reasons, like trying to prove to other people that you can do something. So speaking of other people, this line, it's a little subtle. People matter more than people. If you spend your time thinking about what people think, what will people think? What will they say? I can prove something to them. It's the wrong place to focus your attention, in my opinion. What matters are the people, the specific people, Morgan and Dwight and Hakeem and Carrie and John, and the people that I know, your parents, your spouses, your aunts, your uncles, your priests, your teachers, whoever it is. Those are the people that matter, not what will everybody else think. You have to figure out whose opinion matters to you and think about what that means overall. I have had probably hundreds of job reviews in my life. Some of them have been quite lovely, glowing praise. Some of them have probably been average. I don't save those. But I do have one of my godchildren gave me some good feedback, that I was a good football player. So I saved that. This is my stepdaughter and her kids. I care what they think about me. They're not people, generically. And a few years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the folks on my team, and I've got lots of these cards, they all did things to acknowledge me as a person and what I was going through and what that looked like. Because it wasn't just people I worked with. It was very specifically Michael and Christine and Brian and people and those individual relationships. So it's very specifically, for me, the small p people and that you have to think about. Be curious and have fun. So sometimes you work for a company and it's great, but there's nowhere for you to go. So in my case, I was working for Target. I had gone there I was going to be there for just a couple of years. I wound up being there 13 years. But in the late 90s, I thought, this is going to tell you just how smart I am. I thought the internet was going to be a big thing in the world. I didn't invent it, but I really thought it was going to change the way people did things. And Target did not have an internet group. They did not have an internet site. They did not own the URL target.com, nothing. So I went out and got myself a job on the internet. I went out, found a job, went to Sand Hill Road, did all of those things, went in on a Sunday to resign. And I resigned to my boss, and he wouldn't accept my resignation, which is a weird, when you say I quit and they say no. So what do you do then? So I went in the next day, and we talked about it, and they decided, the powers that be at Target, decided, you know what, we probably should get into the internet. So I was named one of the first people on the internet team. We went out and we bought the URL target.com. We launched a whole bunch of websites, went on to do a whole bunch of different things, which was really fun to be part of. I don't think I've ever worked harder, but it was pretty amazing to be part of that team and part of it. And it was because I was curious and I was asking questions. And I put a picture in here to show you. I put the cover of Forbes magazine just because I like that it has the word crazy on it. And then this is me. And you can see I'm having fun. So it's important to have fun and be happy, I think. But it's not all fun and games. So there are times when you have to speak your mind, even if your voice shakes. So when you have something to say, or when you know something isn't right, or when something's not happening properly, it's important that you have the courage of your convictions and your integrity to be able to get up and talk about that and what that looks like. And before you can do that, it's really important that you understand what you believe in and what's important to you. And very randomly, I ran into a guy I used to work with on a plane. This is from October 17th, 1996, and it's things I believe in. And the first, God, friendship, you can get anywhere in the world in 2 flights. Black jelly beans are awful. I still think that's true. Family support and unconditional love are essential. The best feeling in the world is to be number one in someone else's life. It goes on for a while. And boy, I took the time to just write down what I believed in. And so, and I kept the piece of paper, and along the way, I've added some things. One of the things that I've added is that my politics are that I hate bullies, is one of my driving principles. There was a time when I was talking, I was invited to be, as part of the Executive Scholar lecture series at the University of North Texas. I was invited to speak to the audience, and there was about 1,000 people there. And I had gone to see the session before me just to understand what it was about. And a guy named Mike Ullman was talking. He's a former CEO of JCPenney. He's done some amazing things from a charitable angle. And he got up and he talked about what happened at JCPenney. And JCPenney, if you don't know, a few years ago, someone came in and took it over. Ron Johnson had some very different ways to go to market, and the company took a turn south, and he had come back in to save it. And he referred to what happened at the time as the Holocaust. And I took grave offense at that. I was invited to go to lunch afterwards, and I went home and I was just livid. I didn't know what to do. And so I sat down and I wrote him a note that I thought was pretty eloquent. And I talked about the fact that what the Holocaust actually was, and that it was irresponsible and disrespectful of him, and almost criminal for him to actually use that language and use those words in this audience of very influential young people. I don't know if he got the letter. I never heard from him, but it was really important to me that I say something when something is wrong and what that winds up looking like. And I think for me, I'm always feel like I can only be one person, and so I have to be true to the person I am rather than I'll be someone at work and someone else when I go home. I have to be the same person. My godson drew me this picture that I just love. It's a picture of, that's me, and looking sunny and happy. But what I didn't know when I turned it over was on the back, he had some brilliant insight about that I was not the same person and I wasn't being my true and whole self at work. So at this time, I was working at Sears, running a company called The Great Indoors, which is a pretty amazing company, but Eddie Lampert had just bought Sears. And if you follow the news at all, he has not taken Sears to its greatest heights at this point, but he asked me to run a couple of other businesses, and I didn't like the way things were going. I didn't like the way he was running the company. I didn't like the way he was working with people. I didn't like the way the results were, the way he was behaving. It was just a lot of things that I thought were unethical, unkind, a variety of different adjectives you can use. So I went and talked to him, and I talked to the president, and they said things would change, and then they didn't. And I went, and I said, I can't stay here. I was one of the top-ranking women in big box retail at the time, and so I was a spokesperson for them on a lot of things. And I said, I can't do this. It's not right. I don't feel good about this, and I can't be that person that you want me to be. So I quit twice, and they came back and said, well, we'll write down everything we promised you, and it came back like half-assed, and it was ridiculous. So I said, no, I'm done. I'm leaving. And when I left, one of the magazines in our business covered it and put it on the front page that I had left Sears. And there's a couple of lines in here, you won't be able to read it, but I'll tell you, it says that I cited cultural and integrity issues when I left. The corporation's values and mine were not aligned. I value people and they value money. I value results, but I recognize that you get them through people. And so for me, this is a case where I had to take a stand, and I felt bad because I had recruited a number of people to come work with me, and they were still there. And I tried to make it better, and I couldn't, but I couldn't stay there. I had to leave, and this was me making a statement about, you know what, this isn't the right place, and I wanted people to know what that looked like. I didn't go running to the paper, I wasn't shouting out about it, but I didn't want to just leave it lie and not say anything about it. So for me, this was a way of thinking about the people who work at a company, again with a small p. So what are all these individual people? What motivates them? What excites them? How do we get the best out of these people? Because when you work with people, you love and respect on a project, it's amazing the way the work can happen. And that ties into my next point, which is platinum is the new gold. Anybody know what the golden rule is? This is Notre Dame. Okay, yes, Hakeem.
Do unto others what you want done to yourself.
Absolutely perfect, and you get a gift card too. So the do unto others as you would have done unto you. So the problem with that is, what if I want to be treated in a certain way and Morgan has a different way that she wants to be treated? I'm not going to get the best out of her or the way Brock wants to be treated. I'm not going to get the best out of those people if I don't understand what motivates them, what excites them, what's important to them. Is it more important to you to get praise and recognition, or an increase, or a day off, or promotion? What are the things that are important to you? So for me, the platinum version of that is, Do unto others as they would want to have done unto them, which is a little complicated for treat people the way they want to be treated, because that's going to be, when we think about all the diversity that's in the world and the power of diversity, we have to understand what's important to other people and not assume that they think like us and that they're motivated by the same things that we are. It's a really important place to think about it. And I think it goes to kindness. This is from a little boutique in Stone Harbor, New Jersey. And it says, when you look at a person, any person, remember that everyone has a story. Everyone's gone through something in their life that has changed them. One kind word can change someone's entire day. And we all say everyone has a story, but we don't often stop and listen to it or hear it or understand what's going on. So I would say to you, I saw the Keenan Review last weekend, and there's the wave, say hi or walk by skit that they did, right? So say hi, stop and visit with people and just say hello, even if it's just a hello. When my mom was very sick before she passed away, she had asked me, well, she actually directed me to deliver her eulogy. And I said, what should I say about you, Mom? And she said, tell people I was kind. And so for me, someone literally on their deathbed, that's the thing that they want to be remembered for, had a really important, like it stuck in my heart, that's something that people want to be remembered for. Not that they were a CEO, but that they were kind. This is my chutzpah slide. I went to high school on Long Island, so you learn a little Yiddish. And it says, you can't be that kid standing on top of the water slide overthinking it. You just have to go down the chute. At some point, and this is particularly for the women who are here, at some point, someone is going to ask you to do something, encourage you to do something, invite you to do something, and you may say, oh, I'm not the best person for that, I'm not fully prepared, I'm not capable of that, I don't think I can do it, and you're gonna miss a big opportunity. If somebody believes in you and invites you to do something and participate in something, go, embrace it, be part of it. And in my case, I was invited to a panel, a very prestigious conference and a panel, and there was about 20 speakers. And on the panel I was on, it was the closing panel, and there were 3 people. One was the former CEO of Netscape, who is now the Chief Information Officer at FedEx, Eric Schmidt, who was the chairman of Google, and me. So it was the 3 of us up on a stage talking, and I did my best, and I did everything I could, and it was a great experience for me to have. And somebody might have said, well, what's she doing there? But I did my best to do my best. I saved the speaker panelist list, and there's people on it, the president, the CEO of Intel, the president of Microsoft, the CEO of Earthlink, U.S. Senator. So you can tell that there's a lot of fancy people there. I did pull out one it's my favorite. So alphabetically, I came right after General Wesley Clark. He is the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander of the U.S. Army. So ever since then, I wanted to have a job where I get to be the Supreme Allied Commander of something, and I don't have it. So this is maybe an outdated analogy, because sushi isn't as foreign to people anymore. But the idea is that when you're in a place, take advantage of being in that place and experience the things that you have. My dad traveled a lot for business, but he saw hotel rooms and airports. And I was bound and determined that I was going to see more than just that. When I worked for Gallo and I covered from North Dakota to Oklahoma and Maine, I went to a lot of little towns, and I would find something to do in that town. So I have been to the high school play in Bangor, Maine. I've had my hair cut in Kentucky, like all the different things you can do to be a part of it. And a few years ago, I wanted to get away, and I took a trip to Antarctica, which was great fun. And I was sitting at breakfast one morning, and in Antarctica, you have a general agenda of what you're going to do, but they call it an expedition because there's so much ice and weather that you can't always get to where you're trying to get to. And we were trying to get to the British research station one day, and there was too much ice, so we couldn't get through to it. And instead, the captain came over the loudspeaker and said, we're going to have a polar plunge, and we're going to allow you to jump in the water. And I said to the guy I was having breakfast with, I was like, isn't this great? And he was a British journalist, and he said, no, if I want to jump in cold water, I'll go to Scotland. And I was like, well, I think this is amazing. I want to go do this. And so I did. And so this is the only time you're ever going to see a woman put a picture of herself in a bathing suit up. But in the upper left, you can see the ship I was on in the far part of the picture, and the penguin at the top of the glacier. And then I'm walking down the stairs, and in the bottom, you see a guy fully decked out in boots and a parka and hat and everything else, and then me in a bathing suit. And what he's doing is he's putting a strap around me because when I go in the water, if I don't come out, he can pull out my body because it is that cold when you go in. But now I get to say to you, I jumped in the water in Antarctica and I survived because it's a cool experience. So for whatever experience you encounter, I would tell you that this is a great experience to have, or great to think about it. I'd rather go to your wedding than your funeral was something that one of my guiding principles that I discovered right after I graduated from here. One of the women in my class, her husband and she lived in California. He was my boss at Gallo. And they were getting married, but they were getting married back here. And when you live in California, it's a long trip, it's expensive, it's multiple days, you have to take time off, and blah, blah, blah. So I told them I wasn't going to come to their wedding, but I would take them out to dinner when we got back. And then I got a phone call that my friend Dave Mactoff, who was also a classmate, that he had passed away. And so I got on the phone, and his family was from Washington State. So I got on the phone to make arrangements to get up to Spokane to go to Dave's funeral. And I didn't know his family, but I wanted to honor his life. And then I realized that I was honoring his life by going to the wrong ceremony. And so I sent a card to his parents, which I do every year. And then I called up Jeff and Mari, and I said, can I still come to your wedding? And so now, whenever I have a choice where I'm invited to something, some sort of ceremony or something that my friends are doing and experiencing, and I have been honored with an invitation, I try to make that my priority and go and be a part of that, because that's what people are going to remember, and that's what it looks like. So you can always say no, and we'll get together some other time, or you can say yes and be a part of people's celebration of life and what that looks like. Along those same lines, I have a use the good china statement. And I would tell you that the china is a euphemism. So for you, it could be you're saving a dress or a bottle of wine or a uniform or an experience or something for some special occasion. And you're like, wait, we're not going to use that. We're going to save it. We're going to save it and we're going to wait. Well, my experience with that is that you should use the good china, and I'll tell you why, because I married the love of my life, and then on his 50th birthday, he was killed in a car accident. So for me, using the good china, I feel that I'm entitled or have earned the right to say to you, you should go ahead and use it, wear it, eat it, invite it, do all those things, because it's an important part of, you never know when sort of the last time you'll see somebody is or the last time you'll be with them. So that's one of my personal things that I would tell you and share with you. And I've actually never done a presentation and put that up, so it's a little bit weird. But I don't want to end on that. So my last one, and this is super important, and for those of you who've been sleeping and have to take notes, write this one down. You are infinitely more than what it says on your business card. You are brother, sister, mother, spouse, aunt, uncle, cousin, friend, niece, neighbor, whatever it is. And I am on a one-woman campaign to stop people from saying, so what do you do, as an opening line when they meet somebody. It is an important thing because people spend a lot of their time at work, but it is not the most important thing. And I think it's a lazy habit that we all have, because I'll just say to you, so what do you do? And as you get older, you wind up playing kind of political games. So what do you do? Am I more important than you? Can I help you out from a networking perspective? Like, there's a lot of things that go on. And it's much more interesting to find out other things about people and the things that bring us together and the things that help celebrate our differences. And I do talk with people about what they do, but I don't use that as the leading indicator, because it's one aspect of your life. And if you had a family that had an insurance practice and you got into that kind of work and it's not something you want to be doing, maybe that's not what you're proudest of or you don't want to lead with. So there's lots of other things we can do and different ways we can talk about things and what that looks like. And the story behind this one comes from, I was working in Austin, Texas for Burns of Boston. I was the president, and Newell Rubbermaid had decided they would sell all the companies where there weren't patentable products. And picture frames is 4 sticks and a piece of glass. So there's not a lot of patents that go along with that. So in our case, I had a new boss, and the very first time I met him, he fired me, which was interesting. But they brought somebody else in to sell the company. So that day, I was leaving to go to a wedding in New York. So I flew up to the wedding. It was a friend of mine from here, a guy I had actually gone to work at Gallo with. And Tommy was getting married to Maura. And the night before, there was a bunch of people from Notre Dame, and we all got together. And people were like, oh, so what do you do? And I was like, well, you know, this morning I was the president of a company, and now I have a lot of free time. So, so how do you answer something like that? But is it really what matters when you see somebody and you connect with them? Isn't it more important that how are you happy and what are you doing? And Tommy was marrying Maura. Maura's first husband had been killed in 9/11. He was in one of the towers. And so it was an amazingly powerful ceremony because her first husband's family was there, his wife's family was there, and his family was there, and he was going to adopt their little girl. And so that's really what matters, right? At the end of the day, that's a much more important thing than what job I have. What am I doing in the world to make it better? What is my family like? All of those things. Those are important conversations. And you can ask anybody anything. When you sit next to them on a plane, there's so many ways for us to connect as humans. When I would travel overseas and I would be like the ranking member in a Chinese factory visit, I would talk to the people that were taking me about how they celebrated their children's birthdays or what they did for lunch at the office or the things that would connect us rather than, you know, the different positions we had at work and what that looked like, because that's not the most important thing. And my last slide, I will end with I have a personal, in my legacy planning, I have a trust that's set up, and the initials are GBM TBC. And it's my own little private joke, but I'll let you in on it. It stands for Grace Before Meals and Toast Before Cocktails. And it's a philosophy that I have that at the end of the day, when you're sitting down with people, and you're visiting with them and you're having a meal or you're having a cocktail, that you should take the time to honor and reflect on that moment with those friends and talk about it and just at least raise your thing. Every time I see Hakeem, when I leave him, he says, I appreciate you. And that really touches my heart. That's a big deal. That's his version of grace before meals and toast before cocktails. So I think you should get your own slogan. I think you should have your own walk-up song. I think you should think about the people you love and what's important and really what you believe in and the values, because your life story isn't going to start when you graduate. It already started. You just have to figure out what all the elements are that you can weave together that say, I am Patricia, you know, or I am Michael Anthony, or whatever version of yours, whatever yours happens to look like. So I know some of you had to be here. I know all of you are here. I appreciate your being here. I feel honored to be part of your time here. So thank you very much for the time today.
Cathy, obviously, thanks so much. Questions? Got some time.
I have a question. Is it anyone's birthday today? Is it anyone's birthday yesterday? When is it? Sunday. When is theirs? Yes. Okay. Well, you got a cup of coffee too. So, no, Lincoln's birthday I think is next week. Thank you. What does your shirt say? Gluten is evil? Yeah. Okay. I was going to do a thesis on all the T-shirts people wear around here.
So I have a question for you. And thinking about, you know, don't ask somebody, you know, so what do you do? I was going to ask what you're proudest of, and that probably would have led to which of these professional accomplishments, but maybe what's giving you sort of the greatest joy as you look back on all these wonderful experiences, these impressive, you know, professional experiences, but then family and friends, and when have you sort of been happiest? You know, what's sort of really done it for you? What's made your heart sing?
Wow, that's pretty profound.
From a lawyer, yeah.
I think when I look back, it's the people and the relationships that I've held on to. So I still am in touch with people that I've worked with, and I've been mentored by some great people, and I mentor people. And someone sent me a note last week. They were interviewing for a new job, and they asked if I would be a reference, and I said yes. And they said they explained who I was to somebody by saying that I was the person who believed in them before they caught up to believing in themselves. So I saw something, and it made me feel really good that I helped identify all the goodness that was in this guy, and that he went on to do pretty amazing things, and that he remembered me as part of it. So that's one of those people relationships. So if you haven't noticed, I'm a people person, and that's a big part of it.
So I guess if you don't ask people, oh, what do you have like a favorite question or something that you'd like to ask people about instead?
Well, my new favorite is going to be, what's your walk-up song? Depends on the situation. So I ask people different kinds of questions. When I sit with my friends' little kids, I always ask them, what kind of tattoo are you going to get? Which the parents don't really like. Or if your parents hadn't given you the name you have, what name would you have? And it's just something very innocent, but the idea of just thinking about something a little bit differently that gives you the opportunity to have a conversation. But if you're on a plane with somebody, you can obviously ask where they're going or where they're from, or things like that. Or simple things about if I like your sweater, or something to just sort of start a conversation. And even when I walk around campus here, I was talking with one of the folks I take a lot of classes, a lot of undergraduate classes, and one of the folks in my group, I said, I'm kind of invisible sometimes, and that, people think, well, maybe you're a professor or whatever it is, but sometimes people are just, they have that whole resting bitch face thing going on as they walk by, and you just go, hello, and I know they can hear through the AirPods, and then they go, oh, hello, like there's just a little bit of happiness when there's a human connection that goes as part of it. If any of you see me walking around the campus, please stop me and tell me what you're listening to in your headsets, because I'm really curious about that. Somebody asked me the other day about that specific question, so I started taking notes of all of my sort of icebreakers the past week, and they really vary, because they said, how do you do that? I'm not good at small talk. And I don't know that it's small talk, it's just an initial connection with somebody and what that looks like. And I think if your heart is open and your mind is open to it, there's lots of things. What's your name?
Maya.
Maya. Very nice to meet you, Maya. I do ask the people on the plane sitting next to me if it's their birthday, because I would hate to not say happy birthday if it was their birthday. So, but it usually starts a conversation about something. And whenever I'm asked to introduce myself in a big group, I never know really what to say, right? What do you say? Like, hi, I'm Cathy, fly me, but I say, oh, I'm a Virgo, like it doesn't mean anything, but it's sort of like, and I learned that from, I was on the board of the Twin City Gay Men's Chorus, and it meant a lot to them, so I was like, okay, well, maybe it means something to other people too, I don't know. So, but I think, taking yourself lightly is also part of it. What's your name?
My name's Sam.
Hi, Sam.
How do you promote these social values in a management position, and then how do you, as a management position, to support these social values?
So how do I promote my social values in a management position? So I am very clear on the expectations of how we behave and how we treat one another in a work environment. And one of my favorite tools is, and I don't want it to be like, if we're in a meeting and you say something, I don't want to say stupid, but like not politically correct, right? I don't want to wait till we're done with the meeting and we go outside and we talk about it. I want everyone to know that this is not acceptable behavior. So sometimes I would say, Sam, how else do you think we might have said that? Or I'll say, let's try that again. What do you think makes sense? If any of you had the chance to see Scott Danke, who is the co-CEO, global co-CEO, don't tell him I got this wrong, of L. Catterton. He spoke at Jordan Auditorium recently. He talked about, in his company, he has a red card and a yellow card in his pocket, and he takes them out for cultural violations, which I love that idea. Professor Levy's really good at stealing things from other people. I'm going to steal that one from Scott.
Red card and yellow card?
Red card, yellow card. And he said he takes out the yellow card when people are close, and then after that, they sort of start policing themselves. And they'll go, hey, Sam, you're not playing by the culture rules and what that looks like. So I think it's having the courage of your convictions, even if somebody outranks you and what that winds up looking like. My boss at Pier 1, I had a great boss for 10 years, and then I had another boss. And the other boss said to me one day, you have very high standards. And I said, would you like me to lower them? And which is a little sassy, but I was like, yeah, and we should all have those high standards, which meant if I have high standards, you must have low standards, and that's a bad mix. So it's just the idea of feeling like you can say something when you're at a table. And it might be you're not at the actual CEO's table, but you can say to your boss, I'm not comfortable with this, or I have an idea, or I'd like to include this other person, or is thinking about doing this differently. It's very easy to be mean. It's much harder to be kind. It's very easy to just go with the flow. It's much more of an effort to say, hey, we should do something different, or why don't we shake this up? And you're all coming into a workforce that doesn't quite know how to deal with different generations, especially when leaders are of a different generation than the workforce that's coming in. And so you're going to have to help teach them and help understand. So it's not that someone's wrong. It's just there's differences. And how do you work through those in a positive way? Thanks for the question, Sam. Yes, what's your name?
Connor.
Hi, Connor.
Hi. So you've done a very good job of making yourself someone that's like amazing and growing. And so
Well, that's sweet.
We are all college students. And we go to the career fair and we have to deal with, like, have to compete with everyone else. So how would
No,
you
deal with is the right word.
How do you suggest that we differentiate ourselves and come off as someone that's unique?
How do you come off as someone that's unique at the college fair? I think part of it is you have to understand what makes you unique. Some of you, like Hakeem, Dwight, we were in a class in Chris Stevens' class, and one of the things he talks about is this portfolio that you put together and different ways of thinking about who you are. And if you just sit down and think about what are the things that make you unique, because I can't make you unique until I know what we're working with. So once we figure that part of it out, how you represent yourself and how you come across, I can tell you like the sales increases I've had and all those things. I choose to come at it from another place because that's my value and my unique space that I wind up occupying. But it's understanding what does make you unique in terms of the job or the situation of what you're working in. And I'm glad to sit down with you and actually go through that exercise. I'm like the world's biggest accountability coach, so I'll be glad to sit with you and do that. But the idea of when you talk with somebody, being prepared with both who you are and then what that company is and does. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down as a named executive officer in a public company and somebody sits with me and says, so what do you do? And it's like, really? You're going to come interview with me and you've gotten to this point and now you're showing that you really have no idea, you haven't done any homework, you don't have a good question, you ask me about the hours of the company, those sorts of things. And I don't think it should be false. You shouldn't make it up because it sounds like a fancy question. It should be something you're interested in. Because if you're not interested enough to ask a question, then maybe that's not the right company for you to work for. So you can also get more particular and specific as you're thinking about it.
Other questions? So I've got one. I mean, I could go all night here. We say that I invite these speakers for our students. Selfishly, I invite them for me. I mean, I could sit here all night and ask you questions. So one of the themes for the week is women lead and women in the workplace. And you strike me, and probably all of us, as somebody who's comfortable in most every room. But I told you I had the experience about a year ago of being in a room with 300 women and 12 guys. And I was like, whoa. Is this what it's like for women in the workplace and in classrooms and so on and so on? So, you've been on a Little League team, you worked at Gallo, and any advice for the rest of us? And it could be women in a world of men or men in a world of women on, I don't know, you've already alluded to this, how to break the ice, how to sort of make yourself comfortable in that environment or work your way in. Any tips for us?
It's funny because right now the odd experience for me is sitting in class with you guys. Right? So I'm in a class and you're all like, who is that and why is she here? Is she taking notes on us or what she's doing? I took pictures of Dwight's presentation when he made a presentation. I was like, send these to your mom. She's going to love these. But I come at it from a very different angle. And Addison just said we're in the same anthropology class. And so we sit in these small groups and I'm intimidated because I don't know how to be cool and how to fit in and how to say the right things but not take over and what that winds up looking like. So you know what I do? I just go forward and I say, hi, Sam. I'm Cathy. Can I be in your group? Can we talk about this? Or I didn't read the book either, so we can figure our way through this together, And so that is helpful. When I walk into any situation, part of it is the whole fake it till you make it. Mary Lynn Doyle is here, and her husband is one of my classmates. And we were seniors in college, and one day he showed up and he looked really good, fancy, dressed up. And I knew it was an interview day. And he said, I feel like crap, but he said, if you look good, you feel good, you do good. And so philosophically, I've always believed that, you know what, showing up and stepping out and going forward and acting like you belong there and being part of it, rather than like stepping back and not wanting to play. I'm generally a back row sitter, hi back row, generally a back row sitter, and I get that. But my experience has become, as I've gotten older, as I've moved to the front row, not because I can't see or hear, but because I feel like I'm more engaged the closer I sit and the more forward I sit. And so if I am going to be in a meeting, something's going to happen. If I'm going to be in a classroom, I'm going to learn something. If I'm going, like I'm going to make the best of my time rather than just letting time pass. So if I'm going to be engaged in it, I'm going to walk up and I'm going to say, hey, to somebody. I'll find the kindest looking person and just walk up to somebody. I'm going to a reunion this weekend of the people at Gallo that I went to work with in 1985. One of my classmates is still there. He holds like the worldwide record for staying in one company since you get out of college. And I wasn't originally going to go to this reunion, but one of the folks in our group passed away last week, and I thought that was a sign. So now I'm going to the reunion, and I'm a little intimidated. I haven't seen anybody in decades, but I'm going to figure out who they are and go, hi, because I bet they are just as awkward as I do. And so somebody's got to start. And besides, it's from the Gallo Winery, so you know there's going to be wine there. So, and it's also going to help the whole process, I'm sure. So, yes, Morgan.
I feel like you go to so many different events on campus, sports games. I've seen you at every talk that I've been to or everything. Has there been an event this year that's been your favorite, or that surprised you, or that's stuck out to you?
So she's saying that she sort of sees me around in a lot of places on campus, and I try to go to a lot of events. And I'm a second-year senior now, right? So I do try to go see a lot because I know it's a short period of time that I have, and I have to be able to do that. So I do go to games. This week I went to the student government debate and the Keenan Review and Mass at Soren and like a whole bunch of different things that are important to me. One of my colleagues, John, is always like, you don't stop, you just keep going. But I have 1 year, right? And some stuff only happens once. The Keenan Review was pretty amazing. I wasn't sure I was going to understand the jokes, but they really haven't changed in 35 years. So some of the names changed. My godson happens to be the technical director, so I went and had good seats as a result. Thomas Leaker, for those of you keeping score. Yeah, I know, I love him. And I loved that experience. And I'm often a fly on the wall. So y'all are talking and you think nobody can hear you. Like the people that are sitting around you hear what's going on. And I love being part of that and hearing that. And then my engagement with individual students has been terrific because I've had the chance to go sit with Charlotte and have coffee on Sunday and talk about what she's working on and what she's doing. Because she came up to me one day after class and said, hey, could I talk to you about some things? You have a different perspective than I do, and I really respected doing that. I know John does that, and Patricia, and a number of the fellows are here, and Carrie does it. And so all of those experiences and opportunities gives us the chance to think differently. But I do, I really like my classes this semester too, which is really fun to do, but I have a recency effect. I think of everything with the most recent thing I've done. This will be a highlight for me this week. Last week it was the Keenan Review. So, but thank you, I appreciate that. And if you miss something, and people go, oh, you totally missed it, you'd be like, I totally missed it. There's nothing I can do about it, right? So I try to not miss anything. John Gallagher.
I'm not going to ask the obvious question about what you're going to do for your second act. What are you going to do, you think, for your 13th or 14th act?
Oh.
That you're along that path.
You're sweet. I have come to really fall in love with the idea of intergenerational education and the idea of working with people from different backgrounds and ethnicities and understanding that all of us are living longer and want to learn more and do more things. And so I think something in that space, I don't know what it looks like yet, but this has been a really energizing year for me. My old team at Pier 1 had an over-under on how long it would take for me to be a professor at work at a college, because they already felt like they knew the answer. So it'll be something like that, I think. So we'll see. But whatever it's doing, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be challenged, I'm going to be making a difference. Those same rules apply. Thank you.
Well, that might be the perfect place to end it.
Yeah,
Thank you
perfect.
so much.
Thank you.